What's going on, Paisanos? V here, coming at you, well, with the tier list video. You know, I had a buddy of mine hit me up, and he's actually just starting to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! And he wanted to know what's the best decks in the game. So I decided to go ahead and create a tier list. Now, before we begin, I just want to say this tier list is based only on my opinion, as well as my observation on the current game state Yu-Gi-Oh! I just really want to emphasize that point, because I feel like a lot of people are going to be complaining, saying, there's one guy at my locals tops with this random other deck all the time. Great. Nobody cares. If your guy's so good, go to YCS and top, go to regionals and top. Until then, nobody cares. Somehow I feel like this comment's still gonna make its way down in my comment section down below in this video. Call it a hunch. With that said, I want to go with the tier structure we have here. Tier 1 is the best decks in the game. There is tier 0, but right now in the current meta, there is no tier 0 decks. Tier 1 is the best decks in the game. Tier 2 is, well, other decks that are good. And for the most part, Rogue is random decks. There might be topping every now and then, but for the most part, they're not. 1.5 is every special. If you're a new Yu-Gi-Oh player, you probably have no idea what 1.5 is. That's fine. 1.5 is the middle tier, meaning that if you're a good enough player, that 1.5 deck can be played at a tier 1 level. If you're not a good enough player, that 1.5 deck makes the way to tier 2. It's that simple. I can't put certain decks out with tier 1 and 2 without acknowledging the fact that it's player skill that chooses these decks. It's a lot easier to make mistakes with a deck like Branded, which is definitely going to be tier 1. Branded's probably, hey listen, we'll just grab Branded Fusion. That's tier 1. Branded is tier 1. No doubt in my mind. No one's arguing that. If you're a bad player, can you lose all time with it? Sure, I guess. But once again, you're allowed to make more mistakes playing Branded and still have a better recovery in the game. And I think that's really important. The next deck we'll talk about is Ignitus. We'll do everything in a row so it makes it a lot easier. Next deck we'll talk about is Ignitus. Ignitus is tier 2. And the reason why I'm putting Ignitus at tier 2 is very simple. More and more players are just knowing how to get rid of a rival. The main thing on Ignitus is going turn 1 to a rival, turn 2 Axical Talker, and there's no turn 3. The problem is, a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players that are not playing, let's say like Branded, they're playing other cards in their deck like Underworld Goddess to get around this. So even though this is a really good deck, I recently played it not too long ago, it was really fun, really good, really broken, it really doesn't matter how good the deck can be if it still can be, if it can be played against a player at the same skill level. So we're going to a 1.5 player that's playing a deck at the tier 1 level, it's not going to work. This little cool trick that this is do, it's pretty hard to do. But it can work given the right circumstances. Salamangreat also is tier 2. Salamangreat actually has recently been top in Yu-Gi-Oh events, and I really like the deck a lot. A lot more cards got unlocked to even make it a consideration to be played. I do think Salamangreats is really good, but once again, you're playing consistently Salamangreats, you're not going to be able to win every single regionals. Though we have seen some win. ABC Theorons is another tier 1 deck. This deck is absolutely crazy. Now, I think this deck's a really hard deck to play, unlike Branded, where once you understand the opening game state, it's a little bit easier, whereas ABC Theorons, it depends on what you draw, so what can you do? Can you get to ABC Bust Dragon? Can you get to multiple Island Negations on board? Are you okay if you was to get Dark Ruler No More? There's a lot of like weird things ABC Theorons can't have to deal with, but to say it's not a tier 1 deck is just wrong. The deck's insane. It's absolutely broken, and it abuses King Regulus, so I definitely think it's worthy of tier 1 slot. Same with Sword Souls. I didn't think Sword Souls was going to make it to tier 1, to be honest with you. I thought at best, Sword Souls would be tier 2. Sword Souls is a deck that definitely creates a crazy board opening game state, but I think the better social players are those that are not concerned with turn 1, but more or less concerned with turn 3, 4, and maybe even 5. Social players, the better they get, the hardest deck is to play against. And I really do think that a Sword Souls is a tier 1 deck, know that I mind. Next, we have Pendulum Magicians, or Magicians or Pendulums, whatever you want to call it. It's really weird calling a whole game mechanic a deck, but whatever. You get what I'm trying to say. Pendulums are tier 2. And I think the reason why we're going to put Pendulums at tier 2 is very simple. Because not everyone's really playing this deck, but those that really are playing this deck make some pretty crazy boards. And I feel like Pendulums deserve this tier 2 slot, especially with their newest card coming out in this past set. Then we have Strikers. Strikers is a perfect definition of tier 1.5. A relatively new Yu-Gi-Oh player would be playing Strikers at tier 2. A player who knows how to play their Strikers would be playing their Strikers at tier 1. Even though I don't like Mystic Mine, I don't like, once again, Mystic Mine. I want to emphasize Mystic Mine again. D-Barrier, of course, Artifact Scythe, all that jazz. That was a good meta call by a Sky Striker player. It netted him a win at the previous YCS. That's definitely tier 1 worthy. Although most Striker players you play against would be more likely playing at tier 2. So I think Strikers is a perfect version of what is tier 1.5. Tri-Brigade has fallen off. It used to be tier 1, no doubt in my mind, but Tri-Brigade, in my opinion, is a tier 2 deck. I don't think Tri-Brigade is a terrible deck, by the way. It's a great meta core depending on your locals, and even better meta core depending on your regionals. But at the end of the day, everyone knows exactly what you're doing when you're playing Tri-Brigades. You're not shocking nobody. We know your game, we know your end game, and the minute players kind of know what you're doing, they're going to play around it relatively easily, and that could be a huge issue. Heroes are rogue. They always will be rogue. Maybe when heroes start getting Omni Gates, we can start talking about getting bumped up this ladder. And heroes do need an Omni Gate. So I'm going to throw it out there. They have everything else minus an Omni Gate. But heroes is definitely a rogue deck. When a hero player does top, though, it is a big deal. It's massive because it barely happens. DDDs? Oh, man. You can say tier 2. You can say rogue. I'm going to put them in tier 2. I think DDDs have fallen off so hard. I mean, they used to be 1.5, maybe even 1 not too long ago. But DDDs were brought into the meta. Everyone realized what they wanted to do. And everyone just said, no, you're not doing that anymore. And that's basically the story of DDDs in a nutshell. I really like DDDs a lot. But to say they're anywhere beyond tier 2, it's just a lie. Then we have Anamorphius. Anamorphius is a rogue category. Now, once you know what Anamorphius do, and by the way, you played against Anamorphius 2 or 3 times, you know exactly what they want to do. And once you know what Anamorphius want to do, the deck becomes a lot easier to play against. It doesn't go to mention the fact that branded, it just beats over Anamorphia like they're not even there. All you need to do is go into Massacre when you're playing branded, and Anamorphia players struggle to play the game, and that's a huge issue. I think Anamorphia is a really cool deck, and then maybe in another format, they might have been considered tier 1. But that format's not today. That deck's tier rogue, at best. Then we have Virtual World. Another great example between rogue and tier 2, but I'm putting it in tier 2. Virtual World still has many ways to make a lot of crazy boards, but more importantly, a lot of decks on this list have a huge problem struggling to play against Mystic Mine. Even though I don't like Mystic Mine, it is currently in our meta. So with that being said, I think Virtual World has to be a tier 2. They definitely have an answer to Mystic Mine. Their boards are nowhere near as good as a lot of the other decks, including some of these decks in tier 2, what they can make, but they can play through Mystic Mine, and they can play into a longer game state. Virtual World get better as the game state gets longer. The only problem with Virtual World is, sometimes you brick, and it's really hard to say that with 2 Desires and 3 E-Telly, but that does happen. The Punk variant decks, Punk Adventures, what you want to call them, they're tier 1. Once again, I think Punks is basically this format where we had the Aurora combo last format. The Aurora combo is a combo in which you didn't need many cards to go into a full negate board. And that's basically what Punks help do. They help go into a full negate board. Are full negate boards that good in this game? Depending on what deck you're playing. Some decks, yes. Some decks, no way. But to say no, Punks are not one of is not a tier 1 deck is highly wrong. I think Punks definitely make their way into tier 1, and a lot of the tops back me up on this one. All right, then we have this deck over here, PK. PK is tier 2. Hey, listen, it can still do a Cyflock, although not as good. It can still create a board, although not as good, and it can still make a lot of cool plays, although nowhere near as good. It's not a bad deck, though. It's not rogue. You can definitely top with Phantom Knights if you know how to play the deck really well. Could it be 1.5? No. Phantom Knights, at their best, will still struggle against a lot of these other tier 1 decks. Then we have Dragons. I put a Rocket Tracer, by the way, for the Dragons. All right. Then we have Dragons. Dragons are also tier 1. This deck is absolutely insane. It doesn't need a lot of cards to do a lot of things. And I think that's what makes Dragons so good. Unlike a lot of other decks in the game right now, Dragons do not need that much to pop off. They never really have, but even more so now, more than ever. I do think Dragons are definitely a deck, if I had to make it my guess, is one of the decks to look out for at your regionals. This is a deck that you better know what it does, you better know what it wants to do, and you better know what its end board is. Then when you have that knowledge, you become a better player. Then we have Libramancer, 1.5. There's Libramancer fanboys that just like Libramancer, cool. Maybe you'll be realistically a rogue, but we'll say tier 2. And then there's Libramancers that have been topping recently. Sure, I think I'm not a big fan of Libramancers. I'm not crazy about them. I love the artwork. But to say the deck's not that good is wrong. The deck is very good. And decks can catch a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players off guard. You especially know if you're playing Libramancers when the opponent goes to read your cards. They're basically telling you they don't know what you're doing. And they don't know what you're doing, and you do, it's advantage. Then we have the Predator Plant branded variation. I'm putting this at 1.5, and the reason is very simple. Besides the previous YCS in which we saw a lot of top players play Predator Plants, the Predator Plant variation has not done that much. Although maybe it might be good at certain locals, it hasn't done that much at a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh events. Branded is more popular than a Predator Plant offshoot. Though I will say, if you get a really good player, you hand them Predator Plants and you know what they're doing, they can definitely top events, regionals, definitely locals, 100%. So once again, I think Predator Plants is that deck that a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players like, but a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players are not shelling out the money for Predator Plants if they already have branded. Why play an offshoot that is nowhere near as good still as the original version, which is pure branded? Thunderweeds is tier 1. I mean, come on, let's be real. Like, this deck mains D-Fissure. Is it D-Fissure? Not D-Fissure. Well, it's side D-Fissure. It means D-Shifter. You don't need to learn a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh when you're playing Flunderies. In fact, my little experience of playing Flunderies this past weekend and winning this past weekend, playing around the deck, you don't need to learn a lot. Once you know what Flunderies does, that's basically it. There's no, like, ceiling. There's no, like, you can become better as a Flundery player. No. There's not a ceiling. Then again, it's really hard to mess up as a Flundery player. It's, like, insanely hard to mess up. Because the deck pretty much plays itself. Robina, oh, let me get this guy, boom, 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 end pin, barrier statue, and can you break this board? No, game 2, free wins? That's the idea for Flundery players. But with that said, the deck is a threat, the deck is a menace, and the deck is really good. Play against a Flundery player and don't know what they do, you lose. Play against a Flundery player and you do know what they do, cool, you still need to have answer to barrier. And that is a huge problem for a lot of decks. I do think Flunderies is probably the last one of the tier 1 decks on the list, but nevertheless, it's still really good. Sun Avalons. Sun Avalon, I think, made its debut, realistically, Plant Variations made its debut at California regionals. And those regionals are not like a regionals up in some like random place where it's like 100 player regionals. No. The regionals in Cali are absolutely insane. Probably the toughest regionals in the United States. And the top 4, 2 of those decks were Plants. With that said, though, Plants have pretty much done nothing. They've gone silent immediately afterwards. So, is it 1.5 worthy? I don't think so. Because I don't think players have not played this deck. I think players that try and just haven't had that success. But is it, rogue? No shot. I think, once again, it's a really hard division between 1.5 and tier 2. Those 2 players, out of those 4 in the top 4, they obviously knew what they were doing and played a deck at a tier 1 level. Majority of the player base is definitely playing at tier 2. Unfortunately, Shadows is rogue, but here's the caveat. If you're a Shadow player like myself, you know when tier limits come out, we go from like rogue all the way up to tier 1. Not a lot of decks can say that. And I think that Shadows are making a massive comeback again. Ugh, must be nice to be a Doll player. But you have to wait. If you're playing Shadows right now, just know that you're not really playing a tier 1, 1.5, or 2 deck. You're playing a rogue deck. Because for the most part, all you do is make very simplified game state plays, and sometimes they work, majority of times they're not going to work. I'm also counting in this build in here as well, anyone playing anything that has to do with Shadows, so any other Shadow variations running around. Don't get me wrong, I like Shadows a lot, my favorite deck in the game, but to say they're anywhere that could get you like a win, maybe a locals win, maybe, and that locals got to be pretty booty for you to get a win. Drytron's 1.5. Once again, there's not a lot of Drytron plays, but those who are playing Drytrons are just smashing everybody left and right. And I think what makes Drytron so good is the fact that they can easily make their first board combo, and if you break their board and can't kill them within one ritual or Drytron monster, they can redo that entire board in a snap and break your board. And actually, can you break their board again? And if you don't kill them, they do it again. Now, besides the innate abilities of what Drytron can do, Drytron can also go into Vanity's Ruler, or Majesty's Ruler. 2 tributes, 2500 attack, your opponent can't special summon monsters. They go into that guy. A lot of players, once again, if you don't open the answer, you lose immediately on the spot to that. Seriously. Look at all these tier 1 decks besides Flunderies. Flunderies, earmuffs. We're talking Yu-Gi-Oh meta. You don't need to listen. You're just playing Flunderies. You have to learn what these decks do. You just do what you need to do. Besides Flunderies, all these other decks in the meta, for the most part, they need to answer to that board state immediately. And if they don't, well, see you at game 2. That's the power of Drytrons. Once again, Drytrons is a 1.5. It's not at tier 1, but it's not bad at all. Elec is 1.5, and the thing about Elec, which makes Elec such a unique deck in the 1.5 slot, most Elec players have the same skill set, if I had to guess. You can't be really like a phenomenal Elec player. You're flipping up trap cards, hoping to land them on your opponent's face. And then floodgates as well. But to say Elec is tier 2 is just wrong. It's not true whatsoever. Elec has a baseline amount of skill that needs to be played. It's not that difficult. Once you have the baseline amount of skill, I do think Alex can't go any higher. If you have a lot of skill in a lot of these other decks, you can take these decks, especially 1.5, and go higher. You can go to tier 1. Alex, the highest Alex can go, at best, is 1.5. Realistically, you'll see Alex with a lot of tier 2 players. Once again, I don't think Alex is a bad deck, but I do think Alex has a huge issue when it comes to playing against tier 1 players that are playing their tier 1 decks that know exactly what you're doing, because your deck just says, hey, I'm sending Conquistador, I'm sending Hakuero. Is that cool? And most players, they just don't care. They go, that's fine. I have ways around that anyway. It doesn't really bother me. And the minute you hear those words, you just go, oh my god, this is gonna suck. But at the same time, if you flip floodgates and they stick, well, congratulations. Your floodgates won you some Yu-Gi-Oh! It's pretty good. I'm not trying to crap on Alex, by the way. I love Alex a lot, but like, I also want to be honest about what Alex can really do for the game state. Anyway, this is the current meta we're in right now. I think this is a really good accumulation of what the tier list is in the current meta. I think a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Players that are playing the game right now kind of find themselves in any one of these. At the comment section down below, you can hear people bitching about their decks because whatever. I don't care. I'll probably delete some of your comments. I'm not here to hear you bitch. This is what I hear see in the tier list. And then anyone said anything else wrong about it, like, oh, this needs to be over here. You're an idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about. I literally sit down all day long and watch Necrophiles. Trust me, they're bad. They're terrible. A lot of people that do Necrophiles want to be comedians. They're not funny, but the information is real, and information is very important. And to see the amount of players topping, it's crucial. With that said, if I didn't miss a deck, please comment down below. I'd love to know what deck did I miss and where do you feel like it should be going to. I would love to know. Comment down below. It's your boy V. Oh yeah, by the way, I have a website, YGOPaisano.com. We are selling out of tokens really fast. There's a limited amount left still. But these are selling out relatively fast, so you want to go ahead and grab yourself some tokens. Do it right now, because it'll take a while before these get replenished. I guarantee you. And I guarantee you people are going to be complaining when they're gone. Trust me when I say this. With that said, I will be having a new crop of field sources coming through, and we release a new field source every single day on our Discord. So click down below, check it out. It's your boy V, and you guys also have a great day.